Welcome, guys, to How the Frack We Got Here, a show that takes the news and events of the week and try to make sense out of it all. I'm your host, the most Will Buchanan, and on this show, we simply are all about the facts. There are plenty of news stations out there that simply want to do anything short but inform you. Here at How the Frack We Got Here, that's all we believe in. We go up to the left, we go up to the right, we go up to the middle of independence. We go after all sides because there's more than one side of a story to everything. And you need to know it all in order to actually formulate your own opinion. And that's what we try to do here at How the Frack We Got Here. Thanks for listening, and hold on. It's going to be fun.
All right, guys. Today's date, December 20th, 2023, and this is How the Frack We Got Here. I'm your host of the most, Will Buchanan. How the Frack We Got Here. We do take the events of the week and try to make sense of it all. Before we get started, guys, let you know that we are a news podcast. We try to do our best to deliver the news from the most reputable sources with award-winning journalism. We do not do sensationalized news like Fox News, News Media, or whoever else you're attached to. We simply don't do that. At the same time, we do try to watch our language, but sometimes words do fly. At the same time, guys, maybe things that might be shown that might be too intense for younger viewers. So viewer discretion is advised. Aside from that, welcome. So, how do we start this? Could it be good news or bad news? I'm probably going to go with good news because there's no other way to say this, but let's go ahead and get into it.
Former President Donald Trump, the state Supreme Court in Colorado at this hour, ruling that Trump cannot be on that state's primary ballot because of the role they believe he played on January 6th. So tonight, what, if anything, can Donald Trump do about it? Let's get right to ABC's Mola Lenghi, who is live in Colorado tonight with late reporting. Mola?
Well, David, this is a first of its kind ruling. The Colorado Supreme Court determining that former President Donald Trump is ineligible to be on Colorado's Republican primary ballot next year because of his efforts to overturn that 2020 election. The court accepted the argument that Trump engaged in insurrection in violation of the 14th Amendment. Lawsuits like this have come before courts in 7 states, but this is the first time that President Trump has been deemed ineligible for office. But as you can imagine, David, this is not the final word. The Trump campaign calling this ruling deeply undemocratic tonight, adding that they will swiftly appeal this ruling to the United States Supreme Court, David.
It is a significant and historic ruling, and the Trump campaign at this hour saying they will, in fact, appeal it.
Yes, because that's all they do. This is all they do, ladies and gentlemen. If you have been under a rock, the Colorado Supreme Court did actually take a case to see whether or not that highly indicted under multiple court cases, somehow is still not in jail, failed former President Dorito to be deemed ineligible by the 14th Amendment. For all that don't know, they're talking about Section 3, where in case anybody ever wondered, if you ever try to overthrow the government, you're kind of seen as a terrorist and therefore ineligible to run for office. Yeah. So anyway, which we all thought, because how many times have we seen the January 6th video? How many times have we actually seen Trump sit there and talk about, oh, we should go down to that building and stop the steal? How he had all of his cronies and everybody else come up, and Josh Hotley with a fist sign, but turned track star when he realized, oh crap, the mob that I'm inviting is actually out to get us all. Yeah, amazingly how that turned out. And yet, after all that, it amazes me so that we're still not seeing Trump as a terrorist. But thankfully, the good people of Colorado sat there and said, yes, we will deem him ineligible. Now, does that mean that he cannot run for president? Of course not. That just means that he's just ineligible to run for president in Colorado. And the other states where he's still eligible, yes, he could still run. And without Colorado, yes, he could still win the presidency via electoral college. That being said, however, is the reason why in the world of Trump, what happens is if you can't win, you litigate, and you run into the wall and you run into the ground because people still keep giving this man money. That is something I will never understand. That you give a con man money to defend himself, which is what he's doing in each of his cases, because technically he's broke. He really is. And then aside from that, let's also forget the fact this man is still under several other federal cases. And yet he wants to defend himself saying, I didn't violate the 14th Amendment. Yes, you did, jackass. You basically caused a mob to go into a federal building and stop an actual operation, something that you're not supposed to do. So yes, it's amazing that only Colorado has caught him so far, and yet I don't expect other states, especially heavily conservative states, to turn around and do the same thing. However, there is one thing to consider in all of this, and I know this is going to feel weird when I say it, consider, but I'll get to that momentarily, because there's one thing I want to point out, especially to those voting in the next election next year, in the next presidential election next year. If you ever wondered who's going to probably be the most ticked off group of voters, I'm going to call it out here, and you guys can tell me if I'm wrong or not. Women. Why? Mainly because Roe versus Wade was struck down this year, that most states put in anti-abortion laws that went right into effect, that women have to literally take dangerous methods or travel farther just to get their needs met. But even more so, what I called a long time ago about these laws is that they're going to criminalize women who just simply want to have an abortion. And again, on this show, because I have to repeat this because a lot of people don't think we are pro-choice here. What a woman does with her body is her business. As a man, I have no right to say what a woman does with her body, as I shouldn't. Only a woman should. A woman actually has the right of her own body to say and do whatever she wants. The choices and consequences are ultimately hers. Nobody else's. I don't think a group of old ass white men have the ability to tell a woman what she can and can't do and reduce her down to anything but a broodmare. This is not The Handmaid's Tale. So now that I've said that again, I want to get to the story because, again, this is a future that I'm afraid is what's going to happen with women who are simply trying to do the right thing for their health as well as for the safety of a child if they choose to do that.
Glad you're streaming with us. Well, we've been reporting on the growing number of women across the United States caught in the political crosshairs following the overturning of Roe versus Wade in 2022. This story now leading us to Ohio, where Brittany Watts, a 33-year-old Black woman, says she went to the hospital multiple times after bleeding during her pregnancy. Watts returned home where she suffered a miscarriage. Now she's being charged with abuse of a corpse, and she faces up to 1 year in prison and a $2,500 fine. Our senior national policy correspondent Ann Flaherty is here to break it all down for us. So, Ann, this just seems so unfair.
Well, it certainly is a heartbreaking case out of Trumbull County, Ohio. This is a young woman, a young Black woman who had gone to the hospital for treatment. She was told that she had lost her baby because her amniotic sac had broken, her water had broken, and there was no way that the child was going to survive. She was around the point of viability, though, so there was that chance, and she could have had it induced. For reasons that are not immediately clear, she did leave that hospital and then came back the next day. Her lawyer says she sat there for hours with no treatment. Her lawyer thinks that the hospital may have been debating whether or not to treat her based on that Ohio abortion law. She ended up leaving and miscarrying at home. Now, here's the real head scratcher to all of this, which is that when the police were sent to her home, they found the remains. But then they charged her with abuse of a corpse. And, as her lawyer pointed out, a lot of women miscarry at home. It's not immediately clear what you should do with fetal remains. And it's not clear why they chose that path for a woman who had just miscarried.
So Watt's lawyers are saying that her delayed care was the result of this internal legal battle at the hospital over the abortion restrictions in the state. Mercy Health did give us a statement saying the safety and security of every patient who comes to us for care is our highest priority. Out of respect for patient privacy, we will not discuss individual specifics of care. But it doesn't sound like Brittany got good care.
Well, we haven't confirmed exactly what happened at the hospital. We do know that Ohio's viability law their abortion restrictions have to do with viability. So once a fetus is up to about 22 to 24 weeks, then abortion is no longer allowed. It is possible that the lawyers were considering whether or not she was too close to that at that time. We just simply don't know because the hospital, as you say, is not discussing it for privacy concerns. But I think, there's a bigger question here, which is why is this prosecutor then pursuing this as abuse of a corpse rather than a miscarriage case?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, we have a lot of questions surrounding this, obviously. I know you've been speaking with a lot of doctors who say basically their hands are tied, when it comes to treating women and practicing, healthcare by the law. So what do you think this case could actually do?
You know, this is something that groups like Sister Song, Black Feminist Future, they've been talking about this for months now, since the fall of Roe, that anytime that you create laws criminalizing things like abortions, that you're going to see more court cases like this. They say that this is exactly what you're going to see, that people will criminalize particularly Black women and in poorer parts of the country. So we've mostly talked to, women who come from more affluent areas where they were, sounding the alarms on this and demanding that their doctors give them treatment. And we know that for every woman we interview like that, we know there are several, if not hundreds of women behind them that don't have those kind of resources and simply are worried about prosecution from the law. And I think that's one of the concerns that we're seeing in this case here.
So what option?
So we're just going to cut right there for a second, just because that is the future that is scary. And I feel for women on this. I mean, not the fact that if you are pregnant or you just don't want to simply continue the pregnancy, or you want abortion, which again are all your choices, but this is what you have to go through now. I mean, there is a woman who is trying to get care, and I can go into a whole nother round of what's going on with healthcare in the U.S. I've always said healthcare is a for-profit system, and that's 99% of the problem with healthcare in the United States. But imagine you are going to a hospital, you are trying to get care for the abortion that you're about to have, because the fetus itself isn't viable, so it's going to look like a miscarriage. You're trying to get assistance for that. You don't get assistance because you sat there for hours on in a hospital, only because, again, we can go into a whole other thing, whether it's staffing, whether it's doctors, things of that nature. Doctors especially, because now they're on the microscope. Doctors themselves are afraid to give abortions outside of losing their license or going to jail or being considered an accessory to murder. But going back to this woman, she goes to this hospital, tries to get care, doesn't get care, goes home, has the miscarriage. And again, this is the part of where some of those people I like to call, they're pro-life, but they're really pro-birth. They don't really think this through, because it's always speaking for the child. We have to make sure the child is recognized. We have to make sure that the child is taken care of. We have to do all these things. Forget the woman that's actually carrying the child. But I've always said they're full of it, because once the child is born, they disappear. You can't find them anywhere. You certainly can't find them at Head Start. You can't find them at adoption centers. You can't find them at free school lunch programs they're trying to cut. But when the baby is basically a fetus, we must save the baby. But they don't think about the other side of this, that this law they put in place. Well, if you break the law, there must be consequences. And a lot of states are trying to put murder and accessory to murder and manslaughter. And now, if you just saw abuse of a corpse, really, there's not a given manual for women who have a miscarriage. More so have a miscarriage at home. What exactly are you supposed to do with the remains? And how can you do so in a way where you don't wind up on the other side of a legal charge? That right there has been the problem, because you have a lot of folks who somehow finagle their way into positions to where they've made abortions this whole fight for them. They've made abortions their plight. They've made abortions this whole thing of we must protect life as we see it. But at the same time, you notice that there is no, and I looked this up before. I tried to look this up all week. What does a person do? What does a woman do with the remains of a miscarriage if it happens at home? Do you understand that there's very little information on how to take care of that? Very little. Some states have next to none. So what is a woman supposed to do in that situation? Because I call the police. The police are going to charge me? Do I call 911, who are going to get law enforcement involved because, again, it's a fetus that was aborted? Women have it. That's what I sit there and say, for women voters, and I can't stress this enough, you guys are probably going to dictate who the next president's going to be. And I'm going to be honest with you, I don't see a lot from the conservative side. I don't see the GOP side offering any alternatives. But in the sense of this thing, I've also seen that as I'm getting to my next thing, that was a terrible segue, but Madam Vice President Kamala Harris is using that as her platform for 2024. Now, I'm not saying that's a bad idea, because again, because of what happened with abortion and everything that's going on, you have a lot of ticked off voters who are going to want results. And Madam Vice President taking this as her platform is not a bad idea. Do I think she should have done it sooner? Yes. Do I think you should have done it a wee bit sooner when you basically realized that what was going to happen was that the Supreme Court, which is again conservatively leaning Supreme Court, was more likely to struck down Roe versus Wade when Anthony Scalia's take on that was released. Although I still, going to give the person credit that whoever did it did us a solid favor. That's all I'm saying. But again, it's amazing to me now that we have, unfortunately, abortion has been struck down, and a lot of states have, 16 states, I should say, 16 out of 50 states have actually made that illegal. And women have to do so much. You have to travel to a state to where you can get it. And again, they're still trying to prosecute that. They're trying to get you the morning after pill via mail. But again, it's amazing that those that want to basically turn women into broodmares so much will utilize the full effect of the government. And this is coming from the same party that wants less government, which tells you how full of shit they really are. So again, all I can sit there and say is it should be an eye-opener for women come the voting polls. But again, that's the largest group. The second group that should be worried? Immigrants, especially immigrants that can vote. Because I'm going back to Trump again. Because Trump said something that was seen, and yet he's every napkin's wet dream because he says everything with zero consequence. And this one should make you cringe.
Former president said the words he used during a recent interview with a right-wing outlet talking about migrants coming into America.
Nobody has any idea where these people are coming from. And we know they come from prisons. We know they come from mental institutions, insane asylums. We know they're terrorists. Nobody has ever seen anything like we're witnessing right now. It is a very sad thing for our country. It's poisoning the blood of our country. It's so bad. And people are coming in with disease. People are coming in with every possible thing that you can have.
Diseased migrants, quote, poisoning the blood of our country. Now, even stripped of any historical context, those words have power of their own to invoke fear of infection, corruption, invasion from unseen outside forces. And that's no accident. Those same words have been used before. The white nationalists and neo-Nazi marchers in Charlottesville chanting that Jews will not replace us. But their words, blood and soil, Jews will not replace us, blood and soil, was a Nazi slogan, Blut und Boden. Americans on the streets in America chanting Nazi slogans. The phrase that he used, it has such clear historical antecedents.
And he's right. Not to cut off Anderson Cooper, but he's right. The fact that he sat there, and again, Trump in his usual way, because he's always in front of somebody spouting nonsense, and he spouts something else. He tries to sit there and say, we don't know where these people come from, but we know they come from prisons. We know they come from mental asylums. We know they come from the worst places because they sin their worst. Do you see how the sentence itself just contradicts itself? We don't know where they're coming from, but they're sending their worst. How do you figure? But to those on your side of Fox News and Newsmax and the Blaze, oh, it's the gospel. Trump sees it coming because migrants are crossing the border every day. Because the funny part is they see videos like this.
Into the battle over the border tonight, Texas Governor Greg Abbott signing a new law taking arrests into his own hands, allowing state and local police in Texas to arrest migrants suspected of crossing illegally into the U.S. Tonight, the critics who say this is unconstitutional, and ABC's Maria Villarreal from Texas tonight.
Tonight, with a record high number of migrants funneling through the southern border, Texas Governor Greg Abbott signing a new law allowing migrants suspected of crossing illegally to be arrested and ordered deported by the state.
Biden's deliberate inaction has left Texas to fend for itself.
Under the law, once in custody, migrants could be deported or prosecuted, facing up to 6 months in jail or 20 years in prison for repeat offenses.
The goal of Senate Bill 4 is to stop the tidal wave of illegal entry into Texas.
The Texas law immediately challenged as unconstitutional by the ACLU, saying it encourages racial profiling, can lead to family separations, and can deny migrants the chance to request asylum.
This is an extreme law that will not and does not make the communities in Texas safer. It just doesn't.
There is an undeniable crisis at the border. Sources telling ABC News Customs and Border Protection encountered more than 12,600 migrants Monday, a daily record high, apprehending 11,000 outside legal ports of entry, the highest daily total in more than 2 decades. The strain on U.S. resources unprecedented. CBP closing rail crossings in El Paso and Eagle Pass, shifting personnel to counter the surge.
We're facing severe challenges right now.
And David, this law could go into effect as early as March, but critics say it is the federal government, not the state, that should be policing the border. Still, Governor Abbott says that he will take this all the way to the Supreme Court if he has to.
And that's the point I'm getting at, guys. That's Governor Greg Abbott, the same guy who has made multiple issues in Texas, surprisingly got reelected. His big thing was immigration because, again, he's a Trump supporter. And he's now going to weaponize his law enforcement and say, yes, you can now be the modern Gestapo. If you believe this person is a legal immigrant, you can detain them. Because in his mind, they can't stop people from crossing the border. Here's my thing of all this. If you can't stop people from crossing the border, fix your immigration system. This is people coming from not only Mexico and South America, but from areas that are war-torn, areas that have extreme levels of violence, coming here and seeking asylum. But I've said this before, and I'll say it again. It never ceases to amaze me that when it comes down to it, they don't want to fix the immigration system. It's right there with the veterans. It's right there with the Department of Veteran Affairs. They don't want to fix that system either because broke is profitable. That's being honest. Broke is profitable. The fact that our immigration system is broke is profitable. How so? Because the government is now spending more money sending the National Guard, sending everything short of what these borders need. Immigration judges, lawyers, personnel to actually process these people and get them into sanctuary cities for those seeking asylum. But it's amazing that for all of our states, because again, we are a nation of immigrants, except for Native Americans, because, you know, they've been here before everybody. It is amazing that as much as we sit there and say we're a nation of immigrants, we are slowly trying to build a wall. For what reason? Outside of paranoia and fear, because only people of a certain napkin variety are looking at the writing on the wall and saying, wait a second, in about a decade or so, we're not the high ones on the food chain. We're going to see more minority groups become the majority and we become the minority. See, when you've been on top for so long, it's a little hard to see when you can actually be knocked off and be second. And a lot of people actually have that fear, and they're translating it into the fact of the matter. They're saying, well, these immigrants are coming over here and they're having anchor babies and all this stuff. Okay, what's the problem? Fix the immigration system. If you fix the immigration system, you wouldn't have this issue. And the same way with our veterans, you know, the ones they love so much, you fix that system. There'll be a lot more veterans around and not having to the point to where, you know, they resort to suicide or drugs or things of that nature. And they should be given more than what they're getting. But again, I have to stop myself because I can go down a whole other list, because we have just covered the fact that the two biggest groups, and going on three, because we're about to get the third one eventually, but the two biggest groups of voters, women, immigrants, and at the same time, you're wondering, how does Trump stay alive in all this? Well, there's a reason, and I'm going to point out this reason. For the simple fact of the matter, guys, the Supreme Court. Now, here's the thing about the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is once again going to decide the fate of one failed businessman turned conman. They're also going to decide the fate of our country, because there's two things the Supreme Court justices are going to be taking cases on: whether or not Trump has immunity as an executive during the election interference, which, for all those that don't remember, during his run, it was always assumed that he tried to interfere, even though he did call the state of Georgia. He did call the Secretary of State of Georgia and told him to find votes to overturn it. He did sit there and back up old girl in Arizona saying that she won, which obviously she didn't. He did spout the lie that the election was stolen from him and that votes were counted by dark judges, that although every judge that was put in was actually nominated, I should say, put up to vote by him. So it's amazing he's spouting all this. And now these group of individuals, this conservative-leaning group, could now decide how our country goes into place. And I'm sorry, I'm a little freaking concerned. I am so freaking concerned. The reason why I'm concerned, guys, this is the same conservative-leaning Supreme Court that struck down Roe versus Wade. This is the same Supreme Court that dismantled a part of affirmative action because some Chinese Americans believed that because of their race, they were not allowed to an Ivy League school, thereby dismantling diversity across the board. Because a lot of people don't believe the simple fact of the matter that, this affirmative action part doesn't affect everything, when it does. And now that very same Supreme Court is now going to decide on two things. And honestly, if they did, and this is the scary part, this is the what if game that nobody wants to play. Like, what if they decide to turn around and say, you know what? Trump does have immunity out of election interference case. That's one federal case gone out the window. At the same time, they could also decide about Colorado. Now, keep in mind, the funny thing about Colorado is Colorado did exactly what the GOP and Republicans wanted. They wanted the power to go back to the states. Well, here's how I know that line is bullshit. Colorado decided, hey, we want to disqualify Trump from being on the presidential ballot in 2024. We voted. The Supreme Court ruled with us. He is disqualified. Who has a problem with it? Trump, obviously. But then you also have the GOP, who is mad at Colorado. How dare you disqualify Trump? He did not do anything of the sort. But all Colorado did was exercise the same rights that GOP love to brag about. We want to keep the government out and put in more states' rights. Well, Colorado did that, and you're still mad, which lets me know off the bat how full of shit the GOP are. I mean, they really are to a monumental amount of shit. But you know what's so crazy? That Trump's rivals for presidency, Governor Christie, Nikki Haley, Rick DeSantis, and Vivek Ramaswamy, all of them turned around and defended Trump to be in the actual running. Here's my thing. And I'm going to say this once and I'll say this once again. It is amazing to me, number one, that the simple fact of the matter is I have sat there and said that the scary part about Trump is he could turn around and win the Republican presidential nomination and never attend one debate. That's scary. The fact that the last time we looked at the poll numbers, he was leading in double digits. It took the polling of Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis to equal up to a third of what Trump has. Now, with all that being said, however, if I'm a Republican presidential candidate and the number one guy can actually be disqualified and increase my chances, I'm sorry, why the frack am I defending him? Why am I defending him? Oh, well, they argue that the court should not be involved in the election process. And yet somehow we forgot about Bush 2.0 that fast. Court should not be involved in the election process. Honestly, if it wasn't for the courts, W would not have been president. That's just being honest. If it was not for the courts at the time of Bush, of W versus Bush 2.0 would not be president. That's just being honest. The ruling about, for all those that don't remember or too young to remember, it was about the votes that were tallied in Florida. And yet the courts ruled in Bush's favor. Bush won Florida. Bush became president. Somehow we found ourselves in Iraq. But it is amazing to me that they're all defending him. And this is the same people for the last 3 presidential elections. All of them pretty much crapped on him. Oh, I could beat Trump. Yes, you could beat an idiot. But here's the thing. You can't beat an idiot at his own game. It's like fighting with a pig in mud. You'll get muddy and the pig will laugh because you're not going to beat Trump at his own game. Trump touts the fact that he has this cult-like people following him, and that unfortunately that cult has a very high number. Chris Christie, what do you stand for? Absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. Nikki Haley, that's not even your real name. You Americanize yourself to make yourself more amicable to voters. You're also a woman in the GOP, which nobody will nominate. Don't believe me? Ask Tim Scott. He was a black man trying to get the Republican nomination. You saw how that went, like a fart in the wind. America's creepiest Christian, Mike Pence, tried to do the same thing as vice president. Although in the world of GOP and in Trump's cult's eyes, he is seen as a traitor. That is all I'm saying about him. But let's get to Governor Ron DeSantis, the dictator of Florida. This man single-handedly put in a bill that pretty much says that you can't talk about gay relations or gay people from schools K through 12, including teachers. He also turned around and rewritten African-American AP history because he swears it has indoctrination LGBTQ plus vibes. He also took on Disneyland, which was a definitely fail in his opinion. At the same time, he wants to be president, not realizing that out of Florida, nobody likes him. And Vivek Ramaswamy, what can we say about him? Conspiracy theorist, likes to take shots at people, but stands on nothing. And yet at the same time, these four people want to defend Trump. Why do you want to defend the one person, if he is allowed to run, will win this by a landslide? Because none of you four have nothing to offer or give. That part I will not understand in the GOP. But also what I won't understand, student loans. Because guys, this is a thing that needs to be said, just for the simple fact of the matter. 9 million student loan borrowers missed their first payment because a fraction of people out there, along with the GOP, believe that if you take out a student loan, that you should pay it back. And in a perfect world, that would make sense. However, in a perfect world, we didn't have the pandemic. In a perfect world, we did not have inflation. In a perfect world, everything went up, including your paycheck. But as we have now seen, that cost of everything has gone up. The paycheck, well, first and foremost, the minimum wage is still $7.29. Wages have staggered. People have tightened up their belts. And the last thing you want to pay is student loans because the interest accrued still keeps going. This is why I keep saying the entire time I will never understand this, that yes, Biden did want to push forward. He did wipe out student loan debts under certain conditions, under the Public Service Loan Act. Under the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Plan, which again, if you are in a public service position, you can get that done. He's also forgiven the backlogs for those that have been paying for student loan debts for 10 plus, 20 plus years, and realized that, hey, you've been paying for almost 2 decades. At the same time, nobody's looked at the books and said, you know what, let's forgive the rest of that. There is a backlog a mile long, and he's done that. He's also went after for-profit colleges that have defrauded or misled students, and he's forgiven their debts. Now, again, I have said this once, and I'll say this again. How is it that you can do all that, but yet when he wants to wipe out debt, he has to go through Congress? He went to the Supreme Court where they sit there and said, no, the president does not have the ability to wipe away student loan debt, which I still think it's crazy because he has wiped out some. But why not all? Because obviously we can't afford it, because we have this little thing called the PPP loan program. That paycheck protection program was a failure. I will stress it again. It was a failure because not because of the fact that anybody could have posed as a business and really had gotten on and had gotten a loan, whether it's $1,000, $50,000. I think some of them got up to the millions. But for a lot of those people and companies, They didn't have to pay it back. It was forgiven. Think about this. A plan that handed out billions of dollars to Americans and companies. Most of them were actually able to have their own capital to get their own loans, but took advantage of this government program. For a good number of them, if you go on to ProPublica.com, because they got the listing, but a good number of them got their loans forgiven. They didn't have to pay back a dime. And yet, you're asking people who are struggling to make ends meet right now to come back and pay their student loan debt when it's impossible. But again, you can forgive PPP loans, but you can't forgive student loan debt. But at the same time, you see a headline like this, where Congress passes an $886 billion defense policy bill, which is signed into law, which again, $886 billion is going back to our defense budget. A defense budget that has already been extended multiple times. This is the same Department of Defense, guys, that has yet to actually pass an audit. I cannot think of irony, because what the wild part is that people say we have no money for students. We have no money for student loan debt. Why do we have to pay it? Because we're already paying back the PPP loan people. We had to pay. What do you think? And I have to tell some people, why do you think that we should be more angry about? The fact that those that took out PPP loans that had the ability to pay them didn't, and that it fell on the American people? So now you don't want to pay student loan debt because it's like, well, that falls on us. Well, you're already paying one master. Why not pay two? But at the same time, the Defense Department gets a blank check and nobody bats an eye. Both parties, Democrats and Republicans. This has been the one time I would have loved some Democrat go, wait, time out. $886 billion on top of the billion you've already increased with? Where is this money getting spent? There has to be some accountability. But again, it is amazing whenever it comes to our military, no problem. Now, I'm all for paying more. I'm all for giving soldiers more pay. Let me stress that very heavily. Those that work in the armed forces should get more pay. Absolutely no question. That's where the money should be going. But for the simple fact of the matter is, we know it's not. But when it comes to everything else about the American people, you see the simple fact of the matter that people are struggling, and yet we're being told, nah, we can't help you. But armed forces, what do you guys need? It's like, what do you guys need? How many more billion? And we're paying for it. That part is crazy. But moving right along, guys, I want to cover this story because we did cover the shooting of an 11-year-old boy in Mississippi, where the officer was put on trial for shooting an unarmed 11-year-old boy, was also acquitted of all charges, and decided to do an interview about it. Cue the PR spin.
So many questions. An unarmed 11-year-old boy shot by a police officer in Mississippi. A judge is now sealing the release of police body camera video that recorded the moment back in May.
And this decision comes a day after a grand jury decided not to indict Sergeant Greg Capers following a state investigation that found Capers did not engage in criminal conduct in the shooting of Adarian Murray. Officer Capers agreed to sit down with ABC News exclusively to discuss this incident.
It was a situation that I didn't expect to be in. Just had no idea that it would turn out that way.
It was in the wee hours of May 20th in Indianola, Mississippi, when Adarian's mother, Nikayla Murray, says her ex-boyfriend and father to one of her children knocked on her window and demanded to be let inside. 11-year-old Adarian says he was awakened by the commotion and told by his mom to call his grandmother and 911. But according to Nikayla, when two officers arrived, they knocked on the door, then tried kicking it down before Nikayla let them in. Once inside, Nikayla says she told the officers no one was armed. She says they told everyone to come out with their hands up. That's when 11-year-old Adarian, following the officer's commands, says he came out of his bedroom with nothing in his hands and was shot in the chest.
For those who say having a badge comes with a ton of responsibility, and they believe you acted poorly that day.
Unless they're in our shoes, you just never know what you may run into. Spur of the moment. It's a split decision that has to be made.
Have you thought about that little boy since that day?
All the time. All the time.
The aftermath of that decision was tragic. Adarian suffered multiple injuries, including a collapsed lung and a lacerated liver. I talked to Adarian less than 2 weeks after the incident.
I came out doing this, so I ran across the corner, and then I just got shot. And then I ran to my mom, and then so I was bleeding from my mouth. Then my mama, she was applying pressure to my chest.
Adarian said he came out, raised his hands. He recognized you. Did you know this little boy leading up to the situation, or had you ever met him?
I met him before. There's two sides to every coin, two sides to every situation. And of course, they're saying that, but I can tell you that's just not the way it happened.
No justice, no peace. Officer Capers was suspended without pay and remains under administrative non-paid leave. And just days ago, a Mississippi grand jury determined he won't face any criminal charges. Adarian's mom says she's fighting to prevent Sergeant Capers from returning to active duty. I asked him several times to describe what he believes happened the day of the shooting, but he declined to answer on advice from his attorney, citing pending lawsuits.
So you think you did nothing wrong?
I hated that it happened. Definitely wasn't intentional. I hate that it happened. I've shed many tears, done everything I can to get this situation off of me.
Adarian's mom has filed a $5 million federal lawsuit against Capers and the city of Indianola for her son's injuries and for what she says was a failing to properly train Capers.
Can you talk about your training?
Real good training. Same training as law enforcement in California, Georgia, wherever. It's certified training. I'm a certified law enforcement officer. I took pride in what I did. I was good at what I did. I'm a public servant at heart. I always will be, regardless of how this turned out with Indianola Police Department.
Murray family attorney Carlos Moore says Sergeant Capers' actions were a clear use of excessive force.
But you do understand the outrage.
Absolutely.
That comes with this situation. This
Absolutely.
incident.
I'm not blaming anyone for the way that they feel. I have no issue with that. Because if it was me in that predicament, I'd probably feel the same way. But I would hope that if it was to happen to me, God forbid, I would let the process take place instead of just jumping ship or passing judgment before, it should be rendered.
When we spoke in May, Adarian told me that up until this incident, he wanted to be a cop.
You wanted to be a cop?
Yes.
You still want to be a police officer?
No.
Why?
Because I got shot. I do want to be a doctor now.
When I talked to him, he said he wanted to be a police officer before this incident. He changed his mind after that day. Your thoughts, your words to him.
I hate that that's his mindset right now. I can't say that I blame him, but nevertheless, even though he's such a young child, who knows what the future may hold. It may change his mind. Maybe once this all totally ends, maybe he'll see law enforcement in a different light.
Okay, so for all of those that don't remember, basically the guy there is the officer that was Sergeant Greg Capers responded to a call because the 11-year-old that he shot was the one that called 911, and yet, as the 11-year-old said, came out the room, nothing in his hands. The officer still shot him. What? Okay, I know it's Mississippi, and I'm going to be honest about Mississippi. I always wonder because whether it's a cop shooting, whenever a black person is shot, Mississippi kind of goes, you had it coming. That's how Mississippi is, because I will never understand how an officer shoots an 11-year-old boy that has nothing in his hands, and the grand jury clears him. Even more so, by that video alone, that's not remorse, that's anger. You can tell, oh, well, I'm so sorry it happened. I feel for him. I'm like, you are trying your hardest to show remorse. You have none. It's clear you have no remorse. Even more so when your character got called into question, when your training as a law enforcement officer got in question. That was the real person coming out. Oh, I've been trained. I've had great training, about the greatest training that you could have in law enforcement. Really? The same law enforcement that you have to spend longer training as a plumber, a technician, a nail technician, A general contractor, you have to study and train longer in those professions than in law enforcement. And I will say this because I have yet to be proven wrong, especially here in Tennessee. It takes 6 months. 6 months. 6 months as a law enforcement officer in their training academy, and you are out and about protecting and serving. Now, with all that happening, 6 months, and there's not a lot of education involved. They're not requiring a lot. And you can tell they're not requiring a lot. At the same time, the continued training that they should be getting, de-escalation training, noticing special-minded individuals, noticing how to actually not use your firearms in case you have to, actually use words. Yeah, we should see that, but let's be honest, it's law enforcement. Shoot first and ask questions later. But even so, shooting an 11-year-old boy who is unarmed in the chest, the only training that officer has received is that you learn how to shoot to kill. And even more so, now you're stuck at the point to where you have to defend yourself because, yeah, you may have somehow gotten away with it in Mississippi, but yes, your name, just like any other officer up there, regardless of your color, needs to be put up there. You should be known everywhere you go. You should get all this attention that you deserve. Why? Because you got away with shooting a child. And now when the child says, I want to be a law enforcement, I wanted to be a cop until a cop shot me. So now I want to be a doctor. And what's your words? Oh, well, that's unfortunate, but he's young. He'll probably change his mind. But I mean, I pride myself on what I did. It amazes me so the level of audacity law enforcement officers have. That yes, you have quantitative immunity. Yes, you don't have to give your statement of the night that it happened. You actually can sit down, cooperate with others, and give your statement 48 hours later. It doesn't work that well for the person you arrested. They got to get their statement that night. Yes, it always bugs me how cops are given everything short to defend every action they do. At the same time, people wonder why we say F the police. They wonder why we say it. And that right there is a prime example of why. Because if an officer cannot be held accountable for shooting a young child for no reason, why should we help them? Why should we feel bad for law enforcement with the criticism that they get? Because again, there is a big issue with police reform here in our country, and yet every time we try to answer it, correct it, you have the police force, you have the fraternal police order, you have different police unions all coming up and saying, we don't need to do this. Yes, you do. Because those in a higher position always feel like they don't need oversight. And that's the freaking problem. But moving right along from police, I can't help, guys. I hate finding stories like this, but we got to talk about them because there are plenty of people that are incarcerated. And I always wondered because, Richard Pryor said it best about justice. If you go downtown looking for justice, that's what you find, just us. And there's another case of another individual who spent nearly 50 years behind bars for something he didn't do. And the reason why is because of how his case was handled.
On the night of the liquor store murder, Glenn Simmons wasn't even in the state of Oklahoma. He and a co-defendant were railroaded into a death penalty conviction in an unfair trial where the only evidence against them was the testimony of a traumatized teenager who'd been shot in the back of the head, who'd picked out several other black men in a previous police lineup. 48 years, Glenn Simmons has declared his innocence. 20 years, News 4 has been questioning his conviction. Last year, Simmons' attorney Joe Norwood asked the court to take another look.
He had 50 years stolen from him, the prime of his work life, when he could have been getting experiences, developing skills that was taken from him by no fault of his own.
In April, the district attorney admitted Simmons' trial was unfair. In July, the judge tossed out Glenn Simmons' murder conviction. How you feeling, Glenn? I'm glad. And today, Simmons is asking that same court for a declaration of innocence.
This court has considered the evidence presented to it and defended Glenn Simmons.
From the bench, Judge Amy Palumbo read her order aloud.
Court find by clear and convincing evidence that the offense for which Mr. Simmons was convicted, sentenced, and imprisoned in this case at hand, included in the lesser included offense, was not committed by Mr. Glenn Simmons.
Amen. Thank you, Jesus. And Glenn Simmons walked out with a legal distinction few ever receive. Actually innocent.
Yeah, this is the day we've been waiting on for a long, long time. It finally came, and we can say justice was done today, finally. And I'm happy.
If there is any compensation coming to Glenn, it's in the future. Right now, he's still living off of the generosity of other people.
What's been done can't be undone, but there can be accountability, and that's what I'm about right now, accountability.
A finding of actual innocence is essential for Glenn Simmons to sue for the 48 years, 5 months, 18 days he spent behind bars for a murder.
And yeah, I love that don't get me wrong. Okay, that man's literal Mr. Simmons posture. Here's my thing. 50 years, nearly 50 years was taken from you. 50 years was taken from you to have a crime pinned on you that you did not do, for them to come back 50 years later when you're turning 71, and it's just like, we apologize. You are declared innocent. And I love the fact that he sat there and said it. There needs to be accountability. And I'm right there with him, because I've said before in these stories, guys, that for the simple fact of the matter, where is the accountability? Where in the world is the prosecutor that did this? The prosecutor and the prosecuting team. Where's the judge that originally ruled this? Where is all that info? Where are those individuals? Because if they're alive, they certainly need to be prosecuted. If they're alive, they need to be prosecuted. Every case that they touch needs to be reopened and reexamined. Because if they made a mistake, and we keep finding these stories, it's the reason why projects like the Innocent Project is out there. Because if we keep finding stories like this, to where for the simple fact of the matter is that you find innocent individuals who are incarcerated, and they're incarcerated for no reason, and imagine them being released. Yes, and also he is due restitution. He is. 51 years of his life was taken away. He's 71. All I gotta say is run that man his check. But at the same time, his story is one of many. And I keep finding, and I don't mean to say this in a negative light, but I keep finding stories like this when I report them on this podcast, that we find those individuals that when you look at everything that's going on and that they are innocent, and then yet turn around and then you have to scratch your head like, how is this possible? But like I said, if that prosecutor, that team that was over it, if that judge is still alive, they should be held accountable. And it's almost like law enforcement. If you find that a cop is a bad cop, then every case he's ever been a part of or touched needs to be reexamined, because who knows how many more people like Mr. Simmons are inside because of those said people. That's all I'm saying. But again, guys, I would be remiss this week if I didn't talk about this, because it's talked about everywhere. Jonathan Majors. Yeah.
Jonathan Majors from Future Productions after he was found guilty of assaulting his then girlfriend. A New York jury convicted the actor of misdemeanor assault and harassment, acquitting him of different assault and harassment charges. Senior investigative correspondent Aaron Kachersky has the latest.
Not every version of me was so pure of heart.
Actor Jonathan Majors' ascent in Hollywood halted as he awaits sentencing. ABC News parent company Disney saying Marvel is no longer moving forward with Majors after a jury found him guilty of domestic violence.
Jonathan, how do you feel right now?
Majors convicted of 2 misdemeanors for recklessly assaulting his then-girlfriend, Grace Jabari, in March, fracturing her finger and leaving her ear bloody. He was acquitted of assaulting her intentionally.
What happened exactly? Do you know?
No, I don't know. But she's unconscious.
Majors called 911 hours after the assault.
She's my ex-partner. We broke up.
Finding Jabari on a closet floor in their apartment, as seen in body camera footage from responding police officers. Hours earlier, Jabari testified she and Majors had been riding home in an SUV when he received a flirtatious text from another woman. Jabari said she snatched the phone, and Majors tried to pry it out of her fingers and twisted her arm before she felt a really hard blow across my head. Surveillance video showed Majors hopping out of the car, followed by Jabari. Majors then seen lifting her up and throwing her back inside before running off, Jabari chasing after him. Majors' team insisted Jabari attacked him, but said, "We are grateful the jury found Majors did not intentionally cause any injuries to her." Prosecutors said the assault was the culmination of a manipulative pattern of abuse. Jurors saw text messages that suggested Majors tried to dissuade Jabari from seeking treatment at a hospital for a head injury from a prior incident between them. And they heard a recording of Majors scolding Jabari.
How dare you come home drunk and disturb the peace of our house?
And instructing her to behave like Michelle Obama and Coretta Scott King.
I'm a great man. A great man. I am doing great things, not just for me, but for my culture and for the world. That is actually the position I'm in. The woman that supports me needs to be a great woman.
Jabari's attorney said in a statement justice was finally served.
And senior investigative reporter
Well, that was that's pretty much it for that one. Just look, there's no way to put this. There really isn't. Yes, Jonathan Majors did have an issue. Again, there's no other way I can put this. It's be careful the company you keep. Be careful, everything is recorded. At the same time, I mean, you may have had evidence, and I know people are gonna sit there and people have already put on the conspiracy theories. Well, it was the jury wasn't all, it was a mixed jury, and there was some, and how the jury answered is it wasn't all together. It doesn't matter how you look at it, because again, it's like I always sit there and say this as a black man. As a black man, you always have to think 20 steps ahead. You have to. We are in a society where we are not given the same grade line as other men. We are judged 3 times as harder, and yet 6 times as hard to get ahead, to get in the doors that they can walk through easily. At the same time, as a black man, to give some context, you gotta be like the Black Targaryen in House of the Dragon. What I mean by that is there was one black guy among a whole bunch of white folks drinking wine. He's drinking water. That's the type of guy you got to be in today's America. You always have to think ahead. I know a lot of people are sitting there saying, "Oh, if you had a sister, you wouldn't have this problem." It can be argued because Andre Reed had at least a left eye, and we all know what happened to his house. So I'm not saying it, but I am saying that, again, in the public eye, as well as a high-profile person such as he was, you always have to think 20 steps ahead, and that any action always has consequences. Now, I'm not saying what happened to him was right. I'm not saying that it's amazing that the former girlfriend isn't charged at all, considering that she had a warrant out for her arrest. It is what it is. Because if you expect, I mean, him sitting there calling 911 and then the text messages, it doesn't, like, the one thing about the court system in America is that evidence is one thing. True. If you can convince the jury of a lot, then right there, convincing the jury, that's 90% of the battle. That's 90% of the battle right there. If you can convince them, well, then you pretty much got it in the bag. You really, truly do. So, for the simple fact of the matter, guys, I'm just going to be honest about this. Yes, Majors might be, he'll probably make a resurgence at some point. At some point, he probably will make a resurgence. He probably will, but no telling when. Just because the simple fact of the matter, you got caught up. Yes, you gave us a nice little run, but your actions have consequences, dude. And we could argue up and down that this was a political witch hunt. We could argue up and down that the jury had it out for you. The thing about it is, the lesson I keep on saying, because he's only following a pattern of actors, because I think someone pointed that out. He's only following a pattern of actors out there who've all gotten caught up and weren't thinking ahead. And he just unfortunately joins that very special club. But a few more stories where we got, guys, before we call it a night. Again, New York sets up a commission to consider reparations for slavery. I'm glad that they're doing it, but at the same time, what's going to come of it? Because this is, again, here's the thing. This commission is just looking into inquiries on how they can actually track it, because that's always been the main argument when it comes to reparations for slavery. Who gets it? Because they'll argue the fact that not every black person should get it, which I think is kind of BS. Because if you can follow genealogy, then yes, if you can basically spit into a tube and it tells you where you're from, genealogy shouldn't be that hard to figure out, especially in America. And at the same time, that has always been the blackest eye America has had. Because for America to pay reparations to slavery would mean that America has to admit that one race used another race for cheap labor for nearly 400 years. They have to admit that. Because, I mean, I can pull up a list of reparations the United States has paid out to other minority groups easily. But when it comes to African Americans and reparations, as I said before, they'll make you jump through every hoop, because what America does not want to do is they don't want to admit that slavery happened. They're too busy trying to wipe it out from the history books as we see it. And for the simple fact of the matter, guys, it's one of those things I keep saying, like, yes, we saw it in San Francisco. They're still trying to work that out, but they're not giving money. They're doing incentives, which, again, I hate. I hate the fact that it's incentives, because every time reparations has been offered, it's always been cash that's been given. But whenever it comes to African Americans, it's incentives. It has to be this. It has to be that. It's never money. But yet you give money to every other minority group out there. But again, we'll see what New York does with it. Like I've said before, in order for that to happen, America would have to admit that it happened. But again, I digress. The last story before we get to our feel-good segment, guys, I cannot believe we have to talk about this, but we have to talk about this because for the rest of the world, you saw this headline. Senior staff are alleged by conservative outlets to have sex in a hearing room is no longer employed. This basically came out that an aide to Senior Ben Cardin appeared in a leaked video showing men having coitus in a Senate hearing room. Now, you would think, for the simple fact of the matter, that's the end of the story right there. It should be. You know, if two men decided to be coitful in a Senate room where they shouldn't be, then yeah, he should be let go. It's not that big of a deal. But here's the thing. The GOP has always been caught with their hands in the cookie jar. For those that literally, and again, I say this all the time, for those that literally follow the GOP, the family, the party of family moral values, they're always caught with somebody. Mistress, pregnant mistress, gay lover, ex-gay lover, anybody from the LGBTQ plus community, they're caught embezzling. They're caught always red-handed. But Fox News glazes over that. You get one individual who is literally caught on the Democratic side. This is what that fake news channel decides to do. Bear with me. We won't be watching that long.
Oh, this is going to be good. Outnumbered. I'm Harris Faulkner. Joining me today, host of Kennedy Saves the World podcast, Kennedy. Fox News contributor Tammy Bruce. Fox News contributor and host of Tomi Lahren is Fearless. Yes, she is. On Outkick, Tomi Lahren. And co-anchor of America's Newsroom, Bill Hemmer.
A lucky guy.
Okay, we're going to begin with a sex scandal. And it's rocking Washington, D.C. I'm laughing at Kennedy, not the subject matter. A staffer working in the office of Democratic Senator Ben Cardin has been let go after allegedly filming a graphic sex tape in a congressional hearing room. And not just any congressional hearing room. The incident was allegedly filmed in the historic Senate Judiciary Committee hearing room. That's where the U.S. Supreme Court justices have their confirmation hearings. It's also where the 9/11 Commission had its hearings, among other high-profile meetings. And the identities of the two people involved in the video have not been confirmed. However, Fox News legal expert Jonathan Turley is warning that they could face criminal charges. The question is whether this unofficial use would constitute trespass. The question is whether this is in public in a locked committee room. The Capitol Police can argue that access to a staff position does not mean a license for entry for any purpose. Bill Hemmer.
Yes. So lost a job, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Out of a job.
Out of a job.
Rightfully
yeah.
so.
And there's video.
Guys, apparently age 24. How ignorant do you have to be? And apparently, based on the reporting that they were sharing this online with a small group in Washington, D.C., you didn't think it was going to get out? I mean, I've just stupidity, and everybody tells us the younger kids know how to use the devices. Duh. I would wonder if you went back into his own history as to, look, all psychology aside, the lurid details notwithstanding, there's a psychology as to why you do this. And whatever risk you were willing to take, it's all on camera. And I would wonder how many other risks this young man and or others did in a similar fashion.
So Ben Cardin has been around for a long time. Senator, just turned 80 years old. What does this tell you about the situation? I mean, you can't always know what everybody's doing.
You can't, but there is some common sense when it comes to also who you hire, who's in that environment, one of the most prestigious, important places on the planet.
So, like I said, we were watching that long because, again, every time I say this about Fox News is not a real news station. That was already found out in the lawsuit. They are an entertainment company pretending to be a Fox News station, which I find pretending to be a news station. What I find interesting, though, is, again, like I said, a story by a staffer who literally and figuratively may or may not have been caught with another man in coitus in a senior staff room. That should have been the end of the story. He loses his job. Let's be honest. You don't play where you don't crap where you eat. That should be the end of it. Here's the reason why I say Fox News runs with it. Fox News runs with it because it's democratic. If your staff is playing hanky panky in a Senate room, then are you really doing your job as a senator? That's what they're gonna try to sit there and say. Or they're trying to say, well, how old is he? 24? Kids being young, dumb, and you know how that goes. They have to sensationalize it. They have to make it seem like, oh, well, all Democrats have are just horny people all the time. Not realizing that Fox News is still recovering from the millions they've paid out to former correspondents who cited sexual harassment at that actual location. Megyn Kelly, for example one, sat there and said about sexual harassment. Bill O'Reilly, no longer there. Why? Because of sexual harassment. Tucker Carlson, I mean, it's been alleged. Tucker Carlson has had alleged sexual unwanted sexual advances that he did to other people, but it's alleged. But as you can see, he's no longer on Fox News. So how is it that a quote unquote pretend news station is going to sit there and try to be judgmental about a situation that's similar to home? This is why I sit there and say, guys, when it comes to Fox News, you cannot treat them seriously. When it comes to Fox News, you have to look at the fact that it's sensationalized propaganda because that's all they have. They're not going to talk about the truth of the GOP. They're too busy trying to save it. They're not going to talk about Trump. They're too busy trying to basically patron saint him. At the same time, it's stories like this that really should not get any traction that they're trying to blow up and have traction. Why? Because they're not a news station. They're basically TMZ with a different label. So, with that being said, guys, we are going to move to our feel-good segment because usually how the fact we got here, we usually take a lot of things that are doom and gloom and sometimes make these faith many. But hey, it's Wednesday. It's hump day. We're not too far off from that wonderful day of Christmas. And I decided to find something where it comes to educators, because educators have a very special place in my heart. And this teacher did something which, again, should definitely be recognized and welcome. Check it out.
It was the combined efforts of all of the teachers and staff here at Desert Pines, plus the very generous kindness that people showed from all over the place.
The administration before me started this as a way of giving back to our students. And that tradition really was impactful for our students and our community. We're an at-risk community. We are 100% free and reduced lunch. We're a Title I school. We also get additional at-risk funding by the state based on the needs of our student. The teachers had a spreadsheet where students could put in what they wish for, give a reason or rationale why. The why behind it is what's been impactful.
I immediately went to sharing it with what I consider my little close family on TikTok.
This person said, for all the wishes to be granted, slippers. I would like some black slippers to protect my feet from the cold.
It was just tears and, just heartbreak for some of the things that the kids were asking for. They were so selfless in their requests. So many of them were asking for things for their families, for their siblings, for their friends. They weren't thinking of themselves. Between myself and everybody that helped through my video and the teachers and staff here on campus, we have granted a little over the 900 wishes. Because of donations and because of gifts that are still coming in, I think we are going to be able to grant very close to all 1,100 wishes. The students would get passes, and when they finished their finals, they could come to the designated area to pick up their Wishmas gift. We had a line for a while. It was hundreds of gifts, hundreds of students coming through. We were able to grant almost all the wishes because of the teachers that had already stepped up before my video even, got out there. You could ask any teacher in the country, probably in the world, they have gone to get gifts or take care of their kids in ways that are far beyond, the content that they teach.
And again, that's beautiful. I don't care. It's like teachers have always amazed me how they go above and beyond for their students. They really, truly do. At the same time, to be able to grant to be able to grant almost nearly 1,100 wishes, it's unheard of. It really, truly is unheard of. But again, teachers, man, miracle workers, they don't get paid enough. But again, just a great thing to do. But that's going to do it for this podcast, guys. We thank you all for watching, for liking, for letting people know this is live. I certainly appreciate that. Some shameless plugging before we do get out of here. As always, I do want to shout out to my friend Vaughn at Big BZA Dot. You can definitely check him out, Big BZA Dot, on social media. He does beats for shows, for songs, commercials. If you got an idea, definitely hit him up at Big BZA Dot. Everywhere you can find it. Aside from that, guys, I wanted to bring up this because this is something I'm passionate about. This is something that I think will change the landscape of entertainment media as we know it. Because you guys know Netflix, Amazon, Hulu, we know them, we love them. They used to have our shows, they drop our shows, they add content, they remove it, they jack up the prices, they're becoming the new cable. But what if I told you that, right? But I tell you that it's not us. For a lot of people, especially of the people of color, but the people of color blurred community, such as myself, we want something that is for us, by us, that pretty much FUBU, pretty much for us. Hopefully that's it here. And I say hopefully because I hope you guys will take a shot at it and look at it yourself. I'm talking about blurredstation.com. Again, guys, this is a site that has shows, that has entertainment. I mean, the shows are entertainment value, like Issue 1, The Undead Horizon. It has comics, it has manga, it has animation. It is a place to where you'll be able to really go and enjoy yourself. As they call it, they call it the next Netflix for a reason. So if you ever want to check it out, definitely go to blurredstation.com and of course hit the join now button. Now, if you do hit the join now button, please do me a favor. Go to the Blurred's Eye View Affinity membership, and once you're there, under a Affinity Influence Partner, you can select anybody there. Chris Fury, Roomful of Blurs, will be watching. Myself at Black Spartan, Safari TV, Navy Montel, Geek by Heart. By selecting one of us, you actually help us out, which we certainly do appreciate. But the price, $10.99. That doesn't change. $10.99 for what it is right now. Do you understand that at a price of $10.99 that you could still actually get Blurred Station and still get food? We still in inflation. Let's not forget that. Now you're probably wondering about the Affinity membership. Well, there's a thing about that. If you, after 36 months of paying $10.99 a month, you have the option of owning a piece of Blurred Station. Now I don't know about you guys, because I see Amazon, I see Apple TV, I see Hulu and all these things, and I look at the stock prices, and I would love to have that stock, but nobody wants to go to Fidelity or E-Trade or wherever you do your stocks, pay an ass load of money for one stock of that, for just one trade, for one iota, one crumb, if you will. Whereas you can do the same thing at Blur Station for $10.99 a month for 36 months and own a piece of it. And again, you will not be disappointed about the content that is behind that door. I highly recommend that you guys check out Blur Station, join up on the Blur's Eye View. And again, anybody down there, including myself, a Black Spartan, again, we would certainly appreciate that. Speaking of Black Spartan, of course, you can find me, BlackBox447, on all socials. I usually do reviews on everything that I watch and gym stuff because I like to keep in shape. The link at the bottom, I'll make that just a wee bit bigger for you guys to find. Give me 1 second there. There we go. If you copy and paste that link into your browser, it will take you to my link tree. That's the YouTube, Facebook groups for all of my podcasts, How the Frack Got Here, Get Bit, and of course, Alchemist Podcast. Also, check out my brethren podcast, Blur's Eye View, Blurdicon Speaks, Geek by Heart, Roomful of Blurs, Mayhem Media, Safari TV. I think I covered everybody. If not, check us out, Blur's Eye View, every Tuesday and every Thursday on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. You will not be disappointed about the conversations we have there. Again, guys, it's all about a movement. And I keep talking about this, about unity, about a movement, not just liking something. I mean, I love the fact that you like and share this. I really do. But like, share, spread the word. Word of mouth is the greatest advertisement we have in defeating the algorithm. And again, it's amazing what we can do when we're unified. Also, at the same time, guys, as I wrap this up, again, 2024 is going to be a very important year. And also at the same time, guys, be informed. That's the whole point of why I do this show. I hope to inspire and educate you guys to get informed, to get not only know the federal landscape, but know your local landscape. Know who's in your local government. Know who's actually your governor. Know who's actually writing the laws that really determine your way of life to where you live, and get involved. And if you feel the need, there's plenty of sites that'll tell you how to run and get into office. Really and truly, it's not that it's really easy. It's kind of scary easy in some places, but my wish for a lot of you guys out there in the following year is to get involved. Please do not be a sideline watcher. That is something we cannot have. Not when it comes to the next president. Because the simple fact of the matter is, I'm going to be honest, I don't think we can handle another run of Dorito. Not to say that I don't think Dorito won't be in jail, but we have to consider all the chances. Keep in mind, this is the same individual that we didn't think was going to be president, and yet he beat a more qualified candidate because people did not want to vote. All I'm asking, guys, is that you vote. Aside from that, guys, next week, we're going to be off. We will actually come back in the new year. So hopefully you'll be able to join us. So for all those that are celebrating, happy Hanukkah, happy Kwanzaa, Merry Christmas, happy Festivus for the rest of us. If you watch Seinfeld, you'll get that joke. But again, if you're able to celebrate you're able to celebrate the holidays with friends and family, please do so. Please take the time to, relax if you can. Hopefully you don't have to work. Enjoy this time. I know for a lot of people, it's a rough time, but nobody deserves to be alone. And if you can give, or if you can be a blessing to somebody, be a blessing to somebody. Be nice. Be kind. Don't be a dick. Simple and plain. The last thing I'll say about How the Frack Got Here, guys, it's all about staying informed. We are not trying to reinvent the wheel. We are simply giving you all the information, allow you to make up your own mind, but we do provide a lot of perspective that goes along with it. We do better as society once we're informed. We're progressive. We move forward. We try to right the wrongs of our past by making decisions now that we should have done back then, like electing our first Black woman to the Supreme Court, electing our first Black woman to the Federal Board of Governors, electing our first Black woman to be the National Cybersecurity Director. All great things. We don't learn from history. We are doomed to repeat it. That's what we keep asking ourselves. Why does everything go up with your paycheck? Why are we still, again, electing new politicians, but still the same old game in Congress? And most importantly, how the frack got here. Thank you all for watching, guys. Please take care of yourselves and each other. We'll all get through this. Peace.